Much more important than the general attempt to link the anthrax to Islamic terrorists, there was a specific intent, indispensably aided by ABC News, to link the anthrax attacks to Iraq and Saddam Hussein. There we go again, trying to link 9/11 fundamental radicalism with the Hitler Hussein. During the last week of October in 2001, ABC News, led by Brian Ross, continuously trumpeted the claim as their top news story that government tests conducted on the anthrax, tests conducted at Fort Detrick, by the way, revealed that the anthrax sent to Daschle contained the chemical additive known as bentonite. ABC News, including Peter Jennings, repeatedly claimed that the presence of bentonite in the anthrax was compelling evidence that Iraq was responsible for the attacks, since, as ABC variously claimed, bentonite is a trademark of the Iraqi leader. He had his biological weapons program to include it, and only one country has used bentonite to produce biological weapons. So, clearly, the sources all said to ABC News that it had to be Saddam Hussein because there was bentonite mixed in. And that came from the Fort Detrick lab. The same Fort Detrick lab that apparently sent the anthrax out. Interesting, isn't it? Now, it's critical to note that isn't the case that preliminary tests really did detect bentonite and then subsequent tests found there was no bentonite? Well, guess what? No tests ever found or even suggested the presence of bentonite. The claim was just concocted. That's right. Another false story handed to the news. The news went running with it in an attempt to scare the American public into not trusting Saddam Hussein because it was part of the weapons of mass destruction project. Whoever perpetrated the attacks wanted the public to believe they were sent by foreign Muslims. Feeding claims to ABC News to link Saddam to those attacks would, for obvious reasons, promote the goals of the anthrax attacker. The Weekly Standard, that wonderful, wonderful Zionist pro-Israeli publication, published two lengthy articles attacking the FBI for focusing on domestic culprits and relying almost exclusively on the ABC Ross report, which we now know is absolutely a fabrication, insisted that Saddam was the most likely source of the attacks. In November of 2001, they published an article which began, "On the critical issue of who sent the anthrax, it's time to give credit to the ABC website, abcnews.com, for reporting rings around most of the other news organizations because they blamed Saddam." But remember, most of those people that are in the Weekly Standard are part of that neocon conspiracy group that wanted to attack Hussein right from the beginning. And every other Middle East country, all to protect Israel. We know that. We know even before the news of Ivan's suicide, and know especially in light of it, that the anthrax attacks didn't come from Iraq or any foreign government at all. It came from our own government scientists, from the top Army Bioweapons Research Lab. More significantly, the false reports linking anthrax to Iraq also came from the U.S. government, from people with some type of significant links to the same facility responsible for the attacks themselves. Surely, the question of who generated those false Iraq anthrax reports is one of the most significant and explosive stories of the last decade. I mean, who made this up? And why did they tell it? Weren't they the perpetrators? ABC News already knows the answers to those questions. They know who concocted the false bentonite story and who passed it on to them with the specific intent of having them broadcast those false claims to the world in order to link Saddam to the anthrax attacks, and as importantly, to conceal the real culprit, apparently within the U.S. government, who was behind the attacks. And yet, unbelievably, they are keeping this story to themselves. They refuse, that's ABC News refuses to this day to disclose who provided that information. They're allegedly a news organization in possession of one of the most significant news stories of the last decade, and they are concealing this from the public even 7 years later. That's a conspiracy. ABC News refuses to discuss this, and why isn't the government going after ABC News when they know that they have covered up a crime? I guess the criminals don't necessarily want them to get that information out. And who leaked information to reporters and other high-profile people to take Cipro before the anthrax letters were even mailed out? Richard Cohen, in a March 18th, 2008 Slate article in which he explains why he wrongfully supported the Iraq attack. He disclosed this in his article. Anthrax. Remember anthrax? It seems no one does anymore. At least it's never mentioned. But right after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, letters laced with anthrax were received at the New York Post, Tom Brokaw's office. And then he goes on to say there was ample reason to be afraid. Right. The attacks were not entirely unexpected, because as Richard Cohen says, I had been told soon after September 11th to secure Cipro, the antidote to anthrax. The tip had come in a roundabout way from a high-level government official. And immediately he acted on it, or I acted on it, he says. I was carrying Cipro way before most people had even heard of it. Wait, Richard Cohen got a tip about anthrax. He was taking Cipro before the anthrax letters occurred, and yet he failed to disclose that he was told by a high-level government agent. Again, I suppose if you asked the government agent, we would have no idea that anyone would be sending anthrax, just like we had no idea anybody would ever be flying an airplane into the World Trade Center. Isn't Richard Cohen just a little bit interested who leaked that information? Don't you think he'd be wanting to get to the bottom of it as to how this all got out and why he was told something that wasn't true, and how the government knew he was going to be getting the anthrax? Remember, the government who basically insisted it was Hitler Hussein that did this now tells us a crazy scientist at a lab inside the government weapons facility did it. But people say 9/11 could never be an inside job. Another suicide. Another government cover-up. But they'll never lie to you, right? One last thing, and then I'm out of here. Movie review. I just got done watching a movie called American Gangster with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. Very good movie. Long, but a very good movie. But the best part about it is the commentary by Russell Crowe. He's a detective who's a kind of a good guy in that he actually wants to get drug dealers off the street. Contrary to what he says is the rest of the agenda by most of the cops, because this is about dirty cops taking lots of money from the drug system. They don't want to get it off the streets, he says. There's hundreds of thousands of people whose jobs depend upon getting the drugs flowing and through the system. There's judges and prosecutors and lawyers and police and agencies all in existence because of drugs flowing through the streets. And he said, I try to stop it, and they seem not to want to help me. Yep, it's a good movie. They've got some good clues going on here. So if you have a chance, you need some entertainment. American Gangster. It's a little violent, drug-related, some naked people in it. But other than that, maybe you can go get the edited version if the rest of that stuff bothers you. But anyway, this is news. And I'm walking in Memphis. See you next time.
Put on my blue suede shoes and I boarded the plane. Touchdown in the land of the Delta Blues in the middle of a pouring rain.